there's a variety of trends that people might get themselves into that could be done better. So for example, over compressing a verse so that when you get to the chorus, there's not a lift of energy. Even a half dB lift of energy into a chorus is important. Momentum in the track from beginning to end is one of, if not the most important qualities of a track. So in order to have momentum, you need to have some dynamic movement, no matter the style. And this could be very small. I mean, sometimes it's 2 or 3 tenths that I'll bump sections up and down to kind of keep them moving in a way that's a little bit more orchestral. Even if it's pop music, there's something objectively positive about that. Human beings like motion. You can't go too far, obviously, with certain styles, but you can always put a little in. And sometimes that's necessary if people are setting compression in a verse and not adjusting threshold or adjusting master fader for a chorus. So that would be one. What else? I don't know. I mean, there's fairly consistent things all the time that are to be expected, frequency things, but nothing that you would call like a repetitive problem. That's just the difference between a mix room, which is a compromised space, and a mastering space, and a mix engineer who's focused on a single, and a mastering engineer who's focused on a single in context of a whole. I'm trying to think what else. What else have I seen lately that was kind of a trendy issue? Well, I mean, the main things are like conceptual issues. And I will call these mistakes because they're not something that people are doing with the work, but it's an idea that people have. So the last 5 years, this notion of -14 for Spotify, or really any version of looking at metering. Metering is absolutely irrelevant for a mixer. You could go your whole life mixing and never look at a meter. It's just, it's just not important. Sure, if you're clipping over 0, maybe that's a bad idea. But in modern workflow, sometimes you wouldn't even hear that. So the notion of putting some sort of a mathematical numbers or some sort of visual clue ahead of listening and feeling the music, that's a tricky one in this era. Everybody's looking for security and comfort in some sort of external validation, like, oh, the numbers say I'm good, or, oh, the meters say I'm good, or this graph or whatever. None of that means anything, So as a mixer, you could make a -10 integrated average mix that sounds really bright and is horrific. You could make one that sounds really dark and low-endy that's decent. You could make one that's very balanced that sounds amazing. The numbers really don't tell anything. So engineers tend to be, there's a nerdy side to all of us. I certainly have that. But we have to keep it in check. We have to listen. We have to feel it. We have to be, the only kind of objectivist thing is translation, which is really a mastering thing. So even that, it's more important that mixers make musical choices that only translate in their room than thinking about translating everywhere, or thinking about balancing the tracks to each other, or thinking about levels. Like, that's all mastering stuff. So people mentally get in their own way, because really it's easier that way. It's easier to say there's a number, or there's a graph, or there's some visual thing. It's harder to trust yourself. It's harder to do the thing that great artists do, which is just rely on their internal compass. And so as a mixer, I encourage people to do that, because whatever they do is going to be fine if they do that. If they start putting thoughts ahead of what's musical, it gets in the way. I've told this story before, but the 2004, I did a record for Pete Crescent, British artist, and he self-mixing, didn't have a lot of mixing experience, truly an artist, had some hi-fi speakers that were some two-ways, God knows what they were. And what he sent me was, something that wouldn't win any mix contests. If you listen to it online, you'd be like, well, that sounds very, very, very dark and very fat on the bottom, and I don't really know what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And once I adjusted all those things and sort of brought out what was there, turns out the musical decisions were amazing. And it was a beautiful record because he had made nothing but musical choices in his space with his monitoring. And very much no objectivist thinking, very subjectivist thinking, but he had good taste and he was musical. And that's what wins the day. The person that, wins the mix contest, I won't name names, but there are people who are very famous for mixing who could win a mix contest, but there's things missing in those mixes that I hear being done better in people who are doing technically worse mixes. So yeah, there's that. There's the minus 14, minus 10, any kind of measurement and any kind of visual. You got to feel it. It's got to have momentum. You got to have enough vocal, not too much. You've got to have the right kind of mid-side, low end balance for your style, the right kind of dynamics, limiting and compression for your style. And those are the things that really matter.
To watch the full video, click the link below and don't forget to subscribe.